we have decided to implement the project in Grenada. However, the implications of the project obviously will be felt or is applicable to other Caribbean countries. The aim of the project is to demonstrate and promote solar drying of root crops, especially sweet potato, and to a lesser extent, cassava. The adoption of solar drying is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and therefore lessen the impact of climate change. The presenters will speak more about this during the webinar. By way of some housekeeping rules, we'd like you to mute your microphones during the webinar. Questions are to be reserved for the end of each presentation. And you can use the raise hand feature to indicate that you want to ask a question. Or you can share your question in the chat. To conserve bandwidth, we are requesting that you as a participant to keep your video turned off, except for the key presenters who may want to have the video on. I'd like to inform you that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on our CARDI website. So let me welcome you once again to this webinar, and we are very grateful for your participation. We have with us today Mr. Elvis Moraine, the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Agriculture, who will bring to us a few remarks at this time. Mr. Moraine.
Yes. You all hearing me well?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, okay, good.
Very good.
Good morning to everyone. Mr. Andel, thank you very much for your kind words of welcome. And of course, invitation for the Ministry of Agriculture and Lands to bring some brief remarks to this very important launch of this project. I also want to bring greetings on behalf of the Minister for Agriculture and Lands, that is Honorable Yolande Bean Hosford. I am very pleased, and I'm sure that the Ministry of Agriculture is very excited to be part of this. And we are elated that Grenada is the country that, you know, this pilot project resides as we speak. We are confident that the lessons learned from this project, you know, can be replicated throughout the region. We believe that this is very timely. And although Mr. Andel alluded to a small project, but we believe it is significant. Significant in the sense that we know when we look at energy and the cost of energy and our quest for clean energy, it's something that, of course, in the forefront and the minds of developing states like ours. So as we look at that project in terms of building resilience through solar technology, it is important that we appreciate and understand where this can take us in the future. We, in this period where we reflect, of course, on the impact and continue to reflect on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, it calls to mind our ability to be, to some degree, self-sufficient where food is concerned. And anything that we can do in advancing this cause is welcome. We are particularly interested because Mr. Andel also knows well that we have been working alongside CARDI over the last, since I joined the ministry in terms of the area of root crop. We know that significant amount of work has been done in the area of cassava. And we're excited about the incorporated now sweet potato in this mix. We are confident that this is going to bring tremendous benefits to our farmers as we continue to encourage them to produce. And as we roll out our national food security mitigation plan, and we look forward to the benefits coming through post-COVID. So we are very happy for the project, and we are very thankful for the FAO for the support they have continued to extend it to Grenada and the region. And we trust that this project would be not just beneficial for Grenada, but it can be used as a prototype going forward as we continue to advance in the area of food and food security. So once again, I wish us well, and I trust that we are going to implement this project in a manner consistent with the project design so that we can bring the requisite benefits to not just Grenada, but to the entire region. So once again, I thank you for the opportunity to be part of this experience, and I wish us fruitful deliberations as we go through to this proceeding. Once again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morin, for your beautiful remarks. We are very happy to have the Ministry of Agriculture as our partner in this project. No stranger to most of us, the Executive Director of CARDI, Mr. Barton Clark, who has been with CARDI for quite a number of years and has also worked in other areas of agriculture in the Caribbean, will bring to us remarks right now on behalf of CARDI. Mr. Clark.
Good morning, all. Special welcome to Permanent Secretary, Mr. Morin of the Ministry of Agriculture in Grenada. Please convey my greetings to the Honorable Minister, Dr. Renata Clark of the Sub-Regional Coordinator of the Food and Agriculture Organization. Let me at the outset express appreciation for FAO's input in helping to bring this matter to the reality of some exposure in Grenada with a view to sharing with the rest, ultimately with the rest of the Caribbean. They were very delighted and think to be partnering with the FAO and the Ministry of Agriculture in this regard. With particular reference and thing to this input towards developing in renewable energy alternatives within the frame of the small island development states. This project will target farmers, agro-processors, policymakers, and utilize solar drying as an option for food processing in the Caribbean, as well as providing perspectives on the production and consumption of cassava and sweet potato forests in the Eastern Caribbean. This builds upon much of what is taking place, because now we do have significant on supermarket shelves evidence of sweet potato flowers, cassava flowers, breadfruit flowers, and the like. Integrating renewable energy in the agricultural sector is a significant cornerstone of CARDI Strategic Plan 2018 to 2022. And that we believe that this will allow us to contribute to sustainable development of value chains to the extent that these would assist in improving the profitability and sustainability of the farmers. The objective of CARDI is to develop sustainable, competitive, and resilient agricultural value chains. All of our plans, and indeed all the plans of the region, are rooted in CARICOM strategic plan, which speaks right in a major way to dealing and addressing the issues of energy security and energy sustainability. And in fact, our regional plans are grounded in the Paris Agreement, which all the countries would have signed, and it contributes to achieving a sustainable low energy future. Promoting the use of renewable energy also directly supports Goal 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals and Zero Hunger, Goal 7, Affordable Clean Energy, Goal 13, Climate Action, and Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. For the agricultural sector in particular, we've seen the disruptive impacts of the extreme weather events. A lot of this is attributed, I think, to global warming, and the extent to which we can make a contribution to reduce the carbon footprint of food, to reduce spoilage and wastage. We believe and think that we should pursue such, hence our involvement in this project, because we must adapt by finding novel ways, working with new systems that are resilient to prolong the shelf life of produce safely without compromising their nutritional integrity. This path will also deliver new jobs and stimulate growth in the sector. As the region is grappling with the higher energy costs and the increasing risk of hurricanes and other natural disasters as a result of climate change, it's imperative that we shift to more sustainable, resilient energy sources. This will have strong positive financial and economic returns as well as social and environmental benefits. Solar drying has proved to be an efficient and cost-effective renewable energy mechanism, which has had the benefit of some experience in the Caribbean, and therefore we believe that we are battling on good ground in order to be able to use this particular project as a means of rekindling interest and renewing endeavor towards a low energy future. Having in Grenada, farmers might have lost market because of declining foreign production, and as a consequence, they might have come out of business. But in recent times, CARDI has been working in Grenada with the Ministry of Agriculture and a number of the bakeries, and been successfully promoting the bread with a certain percentage of cassava therein using cassava mash. In this particular project, we hope to build upon that experience by adding the energy component, which might help us in time to develop new and additional products that we would then be allowed to make for farmers greater sustainability. Increasing cleaner energy and greener, more sustainable production systems will garner higher prices on the market as well as generate entrepreneurial opportunities. The advances in renewable energy is not new to CARDI. Back in the 1980s, we would have been involved in the introduction of biogas digestion systems in Dominica. More recently, we are in Belize working with Marundo Donax as an alternate feedstock and so on for generating electricity. We are looking at use of solar energy to help power our container greenhouse that we have that we're conducting experiments with currently in St. Kitts. And therefore, we really want to express appreciation to the FAO to help us and to further our sojourn in respect to renewable energy to help us and so on to move the sector forward. And in that regard, I would want to point to significant experiences in Barbados. There, probably one of the bigger poultry farmers is now 100% renewable energy, a combination of wind, solar, and biodigestion. And we believe that such can attend the farming community and the processing community in Grenada. And we are thankful for this project to help us and so on to make advances in this regard. We always had fourth division that obtains in Germany, where the pork farmers make more money from the renewable energy that they generate via solar and biodigestion than they actually make for the pork. We too believe that this is the future that we hope to be able to achieve for the farming community and the agro-processing community in the Caribbean. And we look forward to this project, helping us and so on to galvanize actions towards the same. We thank you very much for this opportunity and look forward and so on to your continued collaboration as we move towards making farming more sustainable and profitable in the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
The FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean, Dr. Renata Clark, she will now bring remarks on behalf of the FAO Sub-Regional Office. Thank you very much, Dr. Clark.
So the FAO Sub-Regional Office and the Caribbean extends a very warm welcome to all. In particular, I would like to note the presence of P.S. Moraine, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture in Grenada, Mr. Barton Clark, the Executive Director of CARDI, Dr. Rosa Rawl, the Senior Enterprise Development Officer at the FAO headquarters in Rome, Dr. Linda Wickham, a retired UE lecturer in crop post-production technology, and Dr. Randy Kuhn, lecturer in physics at UE Mona. Members of the agricultural fraternity in Grenada and the wider Caribbean region in joining this virtual Inception webinar on the application of solar technologies in small island developing states. Creating opportunities for employment through agriculture is a high priority in FAO's program of work in the Caribbean, and the importance of getting it right could not be clearer as we face the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. At this moment, when resources are limited for everyone, and there is a pressing need for action to safeguard food security and livelihoods, we need more than ever to be working together. And I'm particularly pleased to be working with CARDI in this timely project and to be gaining knowledge and expertise from the research and academic community of the Caribbean. The first Clark said it all, but I will sort of reinforce a few of the points that he made. To develop a competitive and climate smart value chain, we do need to make better use of solar energy. And technologies such as solar drying and alternative energy production systems do need to be tested. And those that make business sense should be widely applied across the agri-food and production sectors. As I've already noted, FAO is very pleased for this opportunity to work with CARDI in the application of renewable energy for solar drying of root crops in Grenada, and highlighting the importance and use of our non-traditional crops to create viable opportunities for agricultural entrepreneurs. The sub-regional office in the Caribbean is very pleased to be working with Grenada to launch this activity. And as P.S. Moraine informed, Grenada has launched a national food security mitigation and response plan, and they are investing significantly in supporting small-scale farming. So we look forward to using this energy in the country to make sure we have a highly successful pilot that will go on and chart the way forward for similar successes in other of the Caribbean countries. In addition to the application of renewable energy for drying, we will also be trialing applications related to solar-powered cooling and chilling within Grenada in the coming months. So I'd like to thank you all who have joined this webinar for your time, and I look forward to your comments and the discussions that will follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. We are ever so happy to have your presence with us here at this webinar, and also your influence on behalf of FAO Sub-Regional Office. If I should use the word, creator of this project was none other than Dr. Rosa Rawl, the Senior Enterprise Development Officer of the FAO, who is based in Rome. Without any further ado, let me introduce Dr. Rawl to make some introductory remarks on behalf of FAO headquarters. Thank you very much. Dr. Rawl.
So as I said earlier on, it's a pleasure to participate in this webinar and to start off this very small, but as we have heard throughout the discussion so far, the presentation so far, still a very, very important project in terms of the improving energy access and efficiency for small processing enterprises in the region. And indeed, we are very pleased to be able to work in collaboration with CARDI to introduce a systems approach through this work toward transitioning to more sustainable and climate resilient root crop supply chains. Over the past several months, we've had a number of technical discussions and exchanges with our colleagues at CARDI. We've worked and discussed quite a lot with Dr. Robin, also Mr. Andal, Mr. Vermaran Extavor, Dr. Vijante, in terms of what we're doing, the approaches that we are taking, because we want to do something that really makes impact in the region. Now, just to highlight also that this project is funded by FAO and Incatema. Incatema is a Spanish consulting agency working on engineering. So we will, the first set of pilots that we will be implementing this year in Grenada, as was highlighted by Mr. Andal, will be focusing, we will be looking at, will be supported by FAO. That will be the FAO contribution, where we will generate a comprehensive set of data and information. And then we'll be able to use that as a basis for working in the other two beneficiary countries. Initially, we had started off looking at all three countries at the same time, but COVID has really brought us to focus on Grenada, capitalizing on the presence of Mr. Andal in Grenada. And so we will move ahead in that context. Now, I just want to start off with why are we looking at processing the root crops? Because I think there's an important baseline for us to start somewhere on this in our discussions, because processing generates a number of benefits. And that's one of the bases on which we are collaborating with CARDI, because CARDI has that production baseline that we can enhance by adding value to those crops, contributing to reducing food loss and waste, enhancing the shelf life of our fresh produce, generating income and employment, and then also contributing to food security in the region. However, as was highlighted in the presentations earlier on, and particularly by Mr. Barton Clark, we do have to deal with, we are very heavily reliant in the region on fossil fuels, and also the cost of energy is very high, and that also puts a lot of strain on the development of the SME sector in the region. And then what is also associated with this high dependence on fossil fuels is the emissions of the greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. And we as a region are trying our best to really improve on some of these types of, again, as was highlighted, the Paris Agreement, some of the agreements that have been made to help to stem and to reduce some of these impacts. So the introduction of clean and green solar energy will help us in capitalizing on the social benefits as I outlined earlier on, but it will also help us to generate economic benefits in terms of reducing cost, in terms of production, which should translate, we hope, into making that our processed root crops, our root crop flowers, more easily accessible, because they'll be much easier to shipped to dry to move around because they'll be lighter, more easily packaged. You have more control in terms of safety if you market some of these products as a processed dried product. And it will give new opportunities that could actually go beyond just moving from a root crop flour, but looking at other types of opportunities for expanding on using these root crop flours for expanding on opportunities that go well beyond just consuming and using it as an ingredient in food, but going into other types of opportunities that would even take those products further upstream, downstream in the value chain to diversify opportunities for their use. For example, producing bakery products, pancake mixes, but even these wheat flours of this type are often very useful and offer a lot of opportunities in terms of developing new types of products. For example, the ice cream cones that are now produced for people who are gluten intolerant are produced using flours of these types. So I think we should not be looking at this project and the root crop flours as only going as far as a flour, but we have to start thinking also in the future beyond that and going a bit further. So we will be introducing two different categories of facilities, processing solar drying facilities under the project. I was hoping to have been able to show them to you. That's why I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but that's fine. I'm sure we may have later on in the program to take a look. So what I'd like to do now is just to give you a very quick overview of the project. You heard a little bit about it from Mr. Andel. So what I would like to just highlight as are this, some of the key, the targeted impacts, the outcomes, and some of the activities, just so that we have a good sense of what it is we are talking about, what will be done, and of course I talked about background and where we would like to see things go. So in terms of the background, as I highlighted earlier on, this project was developed by FAO and is being implemented through a partnership with INCATEMA. In actual fact, next year, INCATEMA will be doing some of this work in the Dominican Republic and in Haiti on the solar, but they will be looking more at solar irrigation. And then we hope that at the end of 2021, we will be able to bring their experiences from Haiti and the Dominican Republic to the OECS countries. And then we have a big workshop where we can show opportunities that can be presented for the production and the processing sectors for the use of renewable energies, and solar energy in particular. So this is just the broad framework of that collaboration with INCATEMA. As I highlighted earlier on, this year is totally supported by FAO. Next year, our piloting in the other two countries will be primarily supported by the INCATEMA project. The targeted impact of this project is that we would like to see improve climate resilience of our local food systems in the region. And how will we achieve this? Well, through the implementation of this project, what we are planning to do is to enhance capacities of a broad spectrum of stakeholders in climate smart production, good agricultural practice, good post-harvest management practices, processing improvements in minimal processing, solar drying of the root crops, flour milling, packaging, and marketing, toward contributing to enhancing resilience in the root crop processing sector, as well as delivering safe products of good shelf life and enhanced storability making that flour available in formats that offer convenience to consumers, as to tourism, souvenir products, as food security resources, as well as ingredients for further downstream processing. So in terms of the activities, essentially what we will be doing, and CARDI will be working in collaboration with a number of different players and institutions in Grenada, but also in the region, to address the theoretical training of the supply chain stakeholders along the various segments of the supply chain. The other aspect will be hands-on training through the field level pilot activities, applying again a systems approach. So what we would like to do in that process of the hands-on is to generate data and collect evidence. We want to build that evidence base to better inform us in terms of replication of this work, as well as scaling up of root crop flour production. And then also to look at opportunities for innovation. And to inspire those opportunities, we will be actually recruiting through, of course, through the collaboration with CARDI, a Caribbean chef to come up with some innovative recipes and options for using these root crop flours. At the end of the second year, which is when all 3 pilots would have been completed, what we will do is to analyze the data and the evidence that we have generated and produce an evidence policy brief so that we can use that information to help to share and to inform governments on the benefits and the actually of investing in further upscaling, scaling up and scaling out the use of these solar energies. And one of the important issues that I should have highlighted earlier, and I think it's still not too late to highlight, is the fact that the solar technology lends itself to a broad spectrum of crops. So we're starting with the root crops, but one could do a number of different fruits, vegetables, the teas, different types of herbs and spices. I know in Dominica, some people have also been used it for example, drying of copra. So the technology in itself, once we harness the use, we begin to implement it more widely across a number of different sectors. I think these are the things that we are hoping would be major spin-offs, or down the road, this is what we are looking forward to seeing. And then at the end, also in 2021, early 2022, together with Incatema and our partners in the region, we plan to convene a global SIDS webinar to showcase and to share some of the results. I happen to have been based in the Asian region in the past, and I worked quite a lot in the Pacific region. And indeed, these are the types of projects that they are also asking for. So it will be a very useful opportunity, particularly now as we are working across with the webinars. It's so easy for us to bring different groups of people together to showcase, to discuss some of these types of experiences, so that we can actually generate greater interest in this area of work, to be able to garner and better support to be able to upscale some of what it is we are doing. So I wish to say, in conclusion, thank you very much for your attention, and I am looking forward to our continued collaboration as we begin to implement this project. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rosa, for highlighting the features of this project. As I've said before, Rosa is the creator of this project, and we are very happy that she did this and came to CARDI to help collaborate and to implement in this project. And let me remind us as participants, as Rosa did mention it, that the application of the solar drying technology goes far beyond drying of root crops to make flour. We have with us participating in this webinar today a number of people who are into sea moss drying and into herbal teas drying, leaves drying for herbal teas. So they have seen the application of this technology in their sphere, and they will definitely want to benefit, and that's why they are on with us. They want to benefit in the area much again, Rosa. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now leaving in a sense, the introductory part of this webinar, and we're going into the meat of the matter right now. We have with us as our main presenters, two renowned UWI lecturers. The first lecturer who is going to address us is none other than Dr. Linda Wickham. She's going to be addressing us on perspectives on the production and consumption of cassava and sweet potato flours in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, Dr. Linda Wickham joined the academic staff of the University of the West Indies way back in 1982. And she taught there for 35 years. During her long tenure at UWI, she held several university administrative and professional positions, including the Deputy Dean, Outreach and Institutionalization for the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, coordinator of the Business Development Unit of that faculty, also representative of that faculty on the Food and Agriculture and Nutrition Cluster. She was also head of the Department of Food Production, technical advisor of the Ministry of Food Production, Land and Marine Affairs of Trinidad and Tobago for the Staples Commodity Team. She was also the chairman of the Technical Committee for the Agricultural Development Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. And as a matter of fact, she was also director of that same bank for a time. She was also the chairman of the Cassava Industry Development Committee of Trinidad and Tobago Agribusiness Association. During her period at UWI, she also engaged in research of various aspects, just to name a few: post-harvest biology and storage of tropical roots, especially yams, sweet potato, cassava, and the aroids. She also researched post-harvest physiology and storage of horticultural commodities with emphasis on underexploited fruits and vegetables, value addition, product development, and sensory evaluation of tropical commodities, development and utilization of alternate non-gluten flours and composite flours, development of systems for year-round production of alata yams, development of value-added products for input substitution towards regional food and nutrition security. And she has published widely in these areas over the years, focusing on food and nutrition security. Her most recent publication is entitled Successful Manipulation of the Growth Cycle of Yam for Year-Round Production for Food Security and Climate Change. Dr. Wickham is well known as an advocate for food and nutrition security in the Caribbean region, and her passionate impartation of her knowledge to her students over the years is considered as an important part of her valuable legacy. I was one of her students, Dr. Wickham, we welcome you to address us today.
Okay, those of you who know me know that I love this area. I've been working with alternate flours from various carbohydrate storage sources for years. And so I will run through very quickly this presentation because I know maybe some of you are not as familiar with it as I know some of the others are. The focus of this paper is recognizing that from a nutritional standpoint, all components of the diet are important. This paper highlights the role played by carbohydrate energy sources in regional diets, since it is the bulk of the carbohydrate component that most contributes to the feeling of satiety and satisfies hunger. Presentation will be made in 3 parts: the problem and the potential, the products, and the process. First, we look at the problem and, of course, most importantly, the potential. And I must congratulate FAO and, of course, CARDI in taking this particular route and in looking at solar energy. I think we're going to desperately need it in the not too distant future. Which is our major carbohydrate import in the CARICOM region, with approximately 120,000 tons costing US $50 million per annum. The figure may have changed since I wrote this. Why is that a problem? One, wheat is not grown in the region, and it has been implicated as a causal agent in many health-related problems. Prevalent trends in food preferences, however, favor the use of wheat-based products like breads, pastas, fast foods, along with products of corn, rice, and potato. What are the consequences of this? Consumption of foreign exchange to purchase imported food at the expense of its use for developmental options. Compromised growth in the domestic and regional food and agriculture sector resulting in reduced job creation and continued provision of opportunities for a few to make high profits by simply buying and selling imported food and maintaining a very lucrative business by so doing. What are the consequences of this? Very real risk of shortages of carbohydrate staples and consequential hunger arising from our inability to buy enough food to supply the demand of a growing population because 1, we do not have the money, or 2, the food is not available for purchase. And I particularly want to emphasize that in our current environment with COVID, and I'm sure all of you have been aware of the various things happening across the world, from the locusts in East Africa and in India and in South America to the more recent explosion in Lebanon, where some food stores were destroyed. Additionally, we have a continued burden on the health sector as a result of incidents of lifestyle diseases related to the consumption of wheat-based products. What can we do about it? That's the more important question. It is well accepted that a country cannot consider itself to be truly independent while it depends so heavily on food from another country to feed itself. And we can reduce the amount of imported wheat consumed by eating more of what we grow and growing more of what we eat. But what do we grow? We produce carbohydrate storage crops from root and tuber crops, cassava, yam, kadashi, sweet potato, etc. And from musa species, our plantain and our bananas, and of course, from breadfruit and châtaigne. And these are the foods that have declined in production over the past decades because of trends in food preferences and consumption. Yes, persons, especially younger individuals, do not relish the foods prepared in traditional ways using these staples. Instead, they prefer foods like pasta and pizza, cakes, flatbreads, and pastries commonly made from wheat. So what are we to do? This is extremely difficult to change what persons prefer to eat for ethnic, cultural, and religious reasons, the solution has to be that we must make what we prefer to eat from what we grow. Therefore, there's tremendous potential to improve the regional status of food and nutrition through greater utilization of what we grow. In addition, you have the health benefits that are associated with reduced consumption of wheat and its products. And it is therefore time to harness the potential of these products, that is, all locally, traditionally produced carbohydrate storage crops, transformed into flour for use as a composite with wheat or in their own right, to make a range of value-added products common in local diets and specialty cuisine. So what are these products that we're talking about? Almost any product that can be made from wheat flour can be made from non-wheat flour or from composite flour. But several factors have to be taken into account to ensure acceptable quality. And the major factors include the stage of development of the raw material, the product to be made, and the desired qualities of the finished product. The quality parameters most affected are the color, the texture, the moisture content, that's relevant to the handling characteristics, crumbling, ease of cutting, and so on, crust formation, and flavor, which varies, of course, with quantity and quality of the non-wheat flour, plus the flavoring ingredients in the recipe. We have to get products of acceptable quality for this scheme to work. And in order to get the kind of quality to which people have grown accustomed, you have two options. One, a swelling or binding agent, for example, egg whites or naturally occurring gums, must be added during the preparation of the dough to bind the starch granules to imitate the action of glucose. Or two, composite flour, which is a mixture of wheat flour with flour from non-wheat sources in varying proportions, depending on the intended product, can be used. Making quality adjustments, most obstacles are encountered, or most obstacles that can be encountered can also be overcome by careful selection of the recipe. In other words, people must be aware that they can't just take a regular recipe and translate it directly into an acceptable product by using a non-wheat flour. And if this is made clear, most people who complain about their use will eventually realize that they can and enjoy the kind of modifications that are necessary to achieve the desired adjustments. When all else fails, for most products, reduction in the level of substitution will bring about a more desirable result. Selection of the substitution percentage. Of course, this is best done by trials. Generally, the more non-gluten flour added, the heavier the texture obtained, or the more crumbly or brittle, and the darker the color compared to white wheat flour. However, in some cases, the product made from the composite flour is preferred. And for a few others, an acceptable product can be made without inclusion of wheat. And here we go to some examples. Now, I base this on my personal knowledge of what happens and what we have done during training in the lab. So all graduates of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture within the last, not for the last 3 years, but about 4 years before that, have gone through training to not only make the flour from scratch, but make products with it so that they understand the versatility of the use of these non-wheat flours, and they understand the potential of the use of this flour to save us foreign exchange and to help buffer us against changes that may be ahead of us with respect to food supply, especially the supply of wheat, and to show that the potential for doing so many things, some of which, of course, Dr. Roll already mentioned, the potential is great, and that this is an excellent way in which we can move forward in the Caribbean region. Some of you will know Pulori. Pulori has a base in East Indian cuisine, and this just shows the kinds of differences you can get between the wheat flour and the composite flour with levels of substitution. And all these products that I'm going to show you were made in the lab by students of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture during a course I was teaching. So following are some examples of products made from selected carbohydrate commodities, and in all cases, the products were judged to be acceptable by a large enough number of individuals to make the venture worthwhile. So it's not surprising, given the wide range over which products are preferred by individuals. The increased use of whole wheat flour has also contributed to this, since its use imparts similar characteristics to products in which it is substituted for white flour. That is, heavier texture, darker color. These are banana muffins, 40% substitution with sweet potato flour. I selected what we did with only mainly sweet potato flour, but we have used a range of carbohydrate sources from green banana and moko, which I think you call blogo, and plantain, and of course breadfruit, different types. So yellow breadfruit, the white breadfruit, and some of the cultivars of breadfruit that we have at the University Feed Station in Trinidad. Muffins made with 100% wheat flour compared to those made with sweet potato flour. If you look at it closely, you would see that the level of the evidence of rising is less in the sweet potato flour, but it is a very acceptable product because muffins normally are heavier in texture than, say, a sponge cake. Coconut sweet bread, 0, 20, and 40% substitution with sweet potato flour, with the 0 being on the left. Coconut sweet bread, same one, cut to see that you really see at this level of substitution, minimal differences. Sometimes they're not even perceptible based on the recipe you choose to use. This is a very, very possible, very, very doable in the Caribbean region. And I hope that this happens while I'm still active in research so that I can see it happen and encourage those who are getting into the venture. So the commercial aspect of it, to even make and sell without actually having to use the flour yourself, is a real opportunity. Bread, 50% substitution. The substitution with bread was always there. You can see from the photographs the type of quality you can get. Sponge cake, 0, 40, and 60% with sweet potato flour. Very acceptable product, as high as 60% substitution. Cheese puffs, 0, 20, 40%. Again, very acceptable. Coconut drops. You begin to see this is 50% substitution with sweet potato flour. Those on the right, you will see a heavier, you can see the heaviness of the texture, you will see evidence of less rising, but this is what many people prefer in the drops. Coconut bake, 25% sweet potato flour substitution, showing how the dough looks. Now, how do you make adjustments for improved product quality? You start off with a basic recipe, and this is just an example of pizza made with percentage substitution with sweet potato flour, and it illustrates the type of adjustments that have to be made in order to obtain a more desirable product. And what you can see, 100% and 30%. What happened was that was not acceptable. While the toppings were fine with respect to appearance, texture, and flavor, problems existed with the dough. The dough texture was too heavy, it was coarse, and it was dry. The crust was not thoroughly cooked. What happened? We changed the method of making it. You soak the sweet potato flour for 30 minutes, then combine it with the wheat flour. The dryness and apparent reduced cooking or insufficient cooking suggested that the sweet potato was not hydrated, the sweet potato flour was not well hydrated enough. And by making that simple adjustment, this was achieved. So you had a 30% sweet potato flour dough and your 100%, and it was fine. To further make sure that the product was acceptable, the crust was pre-baked to ensure complete cooking. And the final product was acceptable and could not be distinguished easily from the 100% wheat flour. What we used in the end was only 10%. But if you are aware of the levels of importation of wheat flour that we do, even a 10% substitution is great. And this is only for one product. This is a rough guide for the level of substitution, and you would note that things like pancakes can be made with the 100% sweet potato flour because of the presence of eggs. What are the advantages that give these products potential as a buffer for food and nutrition security? And I'm looking here mainly at the small producer and the household level. The methods used are so simple that flour can be made at the household level while offering good opportunities for small, medium, and large-scale enterprises. So you can make flour at home all the way up to a large enterprise that wants to make it for selling in a commercial sense. Flour blends can be used. You can mix moco flour with plantain flour, with sweet potato flour. In other words, the householder can prepare small quantities as they become available and pool batches for later use. This is not recommended, of course, on a large scale because of the level of consistency one would need in a commercially available product. The raw material is sourced from commodities not known for causing allergic reactions. What's happening? Okay, it's on my screen only. The raw material is sourced from commodities not known for causing allergic reactions in a significant proportion of the population. Now let's look quickly at the process. Wash, and I've modified this especially for the small householder. So this can be done at home, and of course escalated to large scale. Peel and wash. Shred. Dehydrate, and this is where the focus of this webinar is going to be after this, because the dehydration step is so critical and dependent on having appropriate small pieces of equipment when you're dealing with it at home. But the step can be done by solar drying, as this project will eventually elucidate. Grind and sieve, and then you package. Quality maintenance throughout the process is extremely critical, and in order to achieve acceptable product quality, control measures must be put in place at every step. What are the major considerations? Ensuring acceptable raw material quality. And get a good product if you start with poor quality raw material. Next, avoiding microbial contamination and microbial growth and multiplication. Next, managing the drying process. And lastly, achieving consistent flour quality. The raw material quality is affected, of course, by a cultivar selection. Some cultivars have more fiber, have more starch, and of course, that will influence the quality of the flour you get. The stage of development at harvest is also critical. For most, in a general way, for most produce, you need to harvest when it's mature, and therefore has the highest percentage dry matter. Of course, the dry matter is what is going to translate into the flour. And you don't want to spend additional energy, solar or otherwise, additional time trying to dry something that has too high a moisture content. The post-harvest treatments and handling are critical because they ensure the kind of purity with respect to microbial load that you get in the product you're handling, and of course, post-harvest storage time and conditions, not only of the raw material, but also of the flour. How do you avoid microbial contamination? Always by maintaining field sanitation in the first place, by minimizing mechanical injury during harvesting, and of course by monitoring the selection, peeling, washing steps to eliminate sources of contamination, including soil and plant debris. Managing the drying process is critical. In some ways, this is the most critical step in the process, preparation of the product for the drying process has to always consider size reduction. Particle sizes must be small enough for rapid drying, but not so small that clumping occurs. If you picture grating any of the root crops with which we are familiar, if you grate it and literally you can get a pulp and you get a cake or a mess that you would have to dry, and you end up with a bigger problem because you get clumps that are so hard and hard to dry. So always you have to figure out what is the best way to do size reduction. And usually it's done by either slicing, thin slicing, shredding, or coarse grating. Another extremely important step is, consideration, is the rate of drying, the length of the drying time, the dryer capacity, and the drying temperature. What you need to do is to prevent crusting and uneven drying. And you need to prevent drying at so slow a rate that it facilitates microbial growth and deterioration or fermentation before your product is properly dried. Achieving consistent flour quality, of course, is always a goal of any good enterprise. And all of the preceding items that were mentioned must be documented and adhered to in order to achieve consistent product quality. Consistent product quality is essential for maintenance of markets through consumer demand and utilization. Recommendations: increase public awareness, education campaign with heavy emphasis on children and young persons. In this way, it is more likely to become a trend and result in sustainable adoption. Provision of incentives for use at the household level for small-scale enterprises and for national public institutions will go a long way for us to see this entire venture materialize into the kind of food and nutrition security measure that we wish it to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, for your presentation. We have a 10-minute slot for questions. I see we have about 2 questions in the chat. Let me see. Linda, wait, let's see. We have a Gregory Linton, could you mute your mic, please? Yes, Dr. Wickham, here's a question. Why sweet potato flour versus breadfruit flour?
I can read it. Let me answer.
Go right ahead.
Yes. Julia Johnson is asking why sweet potato flour versus breadfruit flour, which may be lighter in texture and less sweet. Yeah, but the questions go off.
Well, could you answer? Yeah, go ahead. You could answer from your mind.
Okay, Why breadfruit? Why sweet potato flour and not breadfruit flour? If I really tried to answer you, I'd take 2 hours. All right, breadfruit is very different to sweet potato. Not in the commodity that you eat, but in the crop from which you produce it. Okay? Many territories can't support the level of breadfruit trees or put breadfruit in now for any kind of intervention in the short term. Sweet potatoes can be grown in a bucket if you wish. All right? So it is the nature of sweet potato, I think, is an excellent choice for flour, but it doesn't prevent you from also making breadfruit flour. I use sweet potato because that was in the topic, but as I mentioned, I don't know if you heard me, we have used moko, green bananas, plantain, and breadfruit, several types. So you can make many different types of flour. You don't have to be limited to one type. In addition, as I mentioned earlier too, you can actually make a composite of the various carbohydrate flours that we can do in the Caribbean. So you can mix breadfruit with sweet potato. Color is a problem, but as I mentioned earlier too, the increasing use of whole wheat for health purposes, because whole wheat gives a darker color, that has tended to not make the white or the very light color a real preference anymore. And you're dealing here with situations where you're balancing the need for producing more of your own food and relying more on what you produce and less on what's coming from abroad. Dealing with that and several options that will, in the case of a problem like a natural disaster or failure of food to be, failure of the government to be able to bring food into the region, you must be able to use what you have underground. The more you have underground, the better, because that's always another avenue for utilization. So if I've planted a lot of sweet potato and I have breadfruit trees growing, and I make flour from what I have, it also means automatically that I have the fresh produce in the field or on the trees as well. Sweet potato can be grown, some of the cultivars can be harvested in 3 months, as opposed to the seasonal nature of breadfruit. Those are not the only reasons, but I think that could be relevant just to the question that you're asking and to the discussion this morning.
Next question, Dr. Wickham.
How commercially viable
yes.
do you think these flours can be? Will the project be looking at a cluster or a single entity to make these? As I said earlier, the way, I'm not sure what the project would be doing, but what I would recommend is that this technology and this information be disseminated even at the household level, so that somebody in their house, say a backyard garden with extra green bananas that they can't use and they don't want to ripen, can turn that into flour, put it in a properly sealed and stored plastic bag and then into a container, and use it when it becomes necessary, even if it's to use it as the binder in making fish cakes. So all levels, from the household level all the way up to the larger enterprise, I can foresee somebody literally, as it's done now, selling locally produced, as in regionally produced, any one of these flours in a supermarket or by, at an outlet that is so named and marked and familiar. Is there a preferred variety of sweet potato for making the flour? No. You have to do it by trial and error, but we have used several different varieties, and the main difference is the color. Sometimes you get a difference in texture because some, as you know, especially those that are similar to the ones you get in the USA, are heavier. Those are for sweet potato, they produce for sweet potato pies and so on. They're a little bit heavier. You have some very lovely ones out of St. Vincent that give you more of a flowery texture when cooked. But when you turn it into the flour, those differences don't always hold true. But always small experimentation, trial and error. And the most that will happen is that you have to reduce the level of substitution, depending on what you're making. If the texture of what you're making, especially the texture that responds to the leavening agent, if that is one of the main criteria, then you must reduce the level of substitution. What is the shelf life of the finished packaged product? Sweet potato flour. I have kept the sweet potato flour and used it for kept it for over 5 years and used it, and it's fine. What I think the secret is because the sweet potato doesn't have any natural fat, all these flours tend to have a big advantage over wheat flour, where one of the main deterioration problems is rancidity development. With no fat, there's no rancidity. No rancidity, the product just sits there. It's like how you can keep cassava farine for years and it still tastes good, as long as you do not let it get moist, wet in any way, and therefore prevent mold growth. So packaging it fresh, packaging it with the right moisture content, and keeping it properly sealed against the natural environment, putting it in the refrigerator or freezer, you can keep that sweet potato flour for years, literally, and I've done it. I've experienced in root crop flour making. I have experience in root crop flour making through air drying dehydration. We at the Ministry of Agriculture, St. Vincent, Orange Hill, have been in production for over 4 years. We have produced sweet potato, breadfruit, yam, banana plantain, cassava, tanya, and most recently, flour from Edo. That's good, it can be done, it has been done. Is the process for making any one of the flour, be it sweet potato, breadfruit, cassava, the same? Yes, I don't know if you saw what I showed you for the sweet potato. You do the exact thing for all of them, every one. You get the product from the field, you make sure it's good, it's not rotting, not smelly, not too old. You trim properly, you make sure that no soil, no skin is left, except when you do it with breadfruit and sweet potato. I've done flour from breadfruit and sweet potato without peeling, which eliminates and greatly reduces the amount of labor. So you can't do it without peeling. And let me tell you what happens. What happens? When you sift in the end, you grind and sift it to the normal grade of the white wheat flour. You get left behind all the skin, all the peel, all the dried peel. And that in itself can be now added to animal feed, and you yourself can add it back to bread if you want to have a higher fiber. You can choose how much you add, and you can sell the flour literally as the sweet potato flour or breadfruit flour, and sell the bran as sweet potato flour, a sweet potato bran or breadfruit bran, for people to add back into the product they're making as they prefer, adding more than it would have been naturally or adding less. The shelf life is years, the temperature range is slightly different though. Thank you. Thank you for endorsing what I'm saying. Is that it?
Yes, somebody was asking about the recording. Once you have, would the recording be available? Once you have registered, then when the recording is available, you will be sent the link to that recording. So make sure, if you are present and you have not registered, make sure you register so that you can receive the link when it is ready. Any further questions? You can voice a question if you want also. All right, it seems as though we have expired our questions. So we'll move on now to the next substantive parts, I should say, of the presentation, where Dr. Randy Kunkun, the lecturer in physics at UWI Mona, will be presenting on solar drying for food processing and its mitigation impact on climate change. Let me read that again. Solar drying for food processing and its mitigation impact on climate change. Now, Dr. Randy Kunkun is currently a lecturer in renewable energy at the Department of Physics, UWI Mona campus. His desire for enhanced renewable energy integration throughout the Caribbean, coupled with active research in renewable technologies and energy efficiency methods, positions him as an avid renewable energy advocate. His self-inauguration to renewables began in 2009 at the start of his postgraduate studies. Graduating in 2015 with his doctorate at UWI St. Augustine, with a focus on geothermal energy resource assessment. His continual drive within the academic realm transitioned him to Jamaica, a renewable energy hub for the Caribbean. He has contributed to the development of renewable energy courses and the minor in renewable energy management that the department now offers to the general UWI population. UWI, through the Alternative Energy Research Group, which Randy leads, has now enhanced its relation to the private sector with companies such as Wigton Wind Farm and Solar Buzz, fostering the exchange of research data, training, and certification of students. Randy sits on the Japan International Cooperation Agency Joint Coordination Committee for Jamaica on matters relating to renewables and is a member of the UK UWI Renewable Energy Team, working through the Frontiers of Science follow-on grant, entitled Climate Resistant Caribbean-Based Renewable Energy Systems from the Royal Society. Dr. Randy, welcome.
Okay, so thank you again for this opportunity to give my piece today. Please allow me to give the greetings. I can see here Mr. Barton Clark, the Executive Director of CARDI, Ms. Elvis Morin, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Lands in Grenada. Then we have the FOA representatives, both Dr. Renata Clark and Dr. Rosie Rule. I'd like to also give greetings also to Dr. Linda Wickham for that nice introduction, especially with a special focus to sweet potatoes and their processes. So what I did try to do with this presentation is to bring awareness, actually, what's going on in terms of the solar dry technologies. I believe my presentation might spark more questions overall, which is a good sign that, it's actually bringing the awareness and, what's actually this technology can bring. And it's good to see that many of the participants, based on their questions that I'm seeing, it's a lot of an economic standpoint of how viable this can make if we were to bring into a full-term industry across the board. So scaling. So what I'd just like to do before I start the presentation, just to hit some keywords that many of the presenters before me had mentioned. So I said there's an economic standpoint, that's one for sure. Dr. Rule did mention a lot about climate resilience. So we're going to be talking about climate resilience and adaptation. We want to have that merger between climate, renewable energy, and agriculture, the interrelationship. How do these three factors all play in? And what I would do is just propose some what we call scaling up or scaling down mechanisms. How can we actually start integrating solar power in terms of photovoltaic technologies and stuff into this topic of hand today. And finally, microbial contamination. That was another key aspect that Dr. Wickham brought up, and something that we really need to look at in the sweet potato production phase when you're towards the generation of this flour. So what I would do now is share my screen to the PowerPoint presentation. All right. Okay, so I did try to make everything in terms of an introduction, in terms of what you're actually going to be seeing. Like I said, there may be more questions going to be sparked here, which is a good sign. I'll try to address them as best as I can. But the focus here, as the topic dictates, is solar drying for food processing and its mitigation impacts, right? A lot of key terms being said there. I want to know what's the interrelationship across the globe. So I want to keep it as concise and compact as possible, give you why we're discussing food security, why is that, an issue at this point, the climate, agriculture, renewable energy interrelationship among climate aspects, classification of solar crop dryers, and some case studies that you're going to be seeing here. So by no means I am not an expert in terms of food production, but in terms of integrating renewables and having that background into how it can affect in terms of beneficial aspects, that is where I can contribute into those aspects. So I began having a read of the strategic plan that CARDI has for 2018, 2022, and just highlight, because we want to have a case. What's the rationale behind all of this here? So a three-front approach that they basically have here: a vision, mission, and core values. And it's that mission aspect, one smack there in the center, that we're focused on in terms of diffusion and application of knowledge through agriculture, R&D. And that's what also bring alive this Inception workshop. All right, what sort of technology applications can we now merge with the current field of agriculture? And we're hearing a lot about sweet potatoes. We, as Mr. Andel had mentioned, we have a lot of participants in herbs and smaller scale products at the same time. So we'll try to address those at the same time. And then why transition? So I always have a bias in which just have this one slide, just to give you the drive, why or where did renewable energy come from, in terms of why we need to introduce them. And these pictures speak a lot. What I am doing is, for full disclosure, I've made sure and put everything in terms of full references. If you want to spark ideas where these figures or these statements have come from, feel free to check them out. I always like to encourage that nature in terms of science. So we all know about the fossil fuel industry, the volatile nature of oil and gas. We've seen the prices of oil and gas fluctuate heavily, and it is something that many of our Caribbean nations and CARICOM members are at risk in terms of the volatile nature. But when that is to play, what's the environmental side? We all know the topic of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's we want to have a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, right? So we hear a lot about the special report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and their 1.5 degrees. Professor Michael Taylor and Douglas Stevenson from physics over at UWI, there's some very well-known contributors to that SR 1.5 report. And just to give an idea of what's happening here in terms of us in the Caribbean, us in the lower latitude regions, we will feel the effects of climate change, and we've been experiencing it throughout the last, and being here in Jamaica, one of the largest, longest dry spells we've had for a while. So you just want to have that idea again. What's the interrelationship, right? And it's a learning curve for me at the same time in terms of food production and its applications and types of sweet potatoes across the Caribbean at the same time. So we have that exists in agriculture. We know what we want to do is replace certain aspects that are existing already with renewables. And we want to hit that front approach in terms of what are the economic benefits to that, what are the environmental benefits to that, right? At the same time. And a lot of these questions that might pop up, once again, will have an economic standpoint in terms of that question we always hear: how viable is this project? How viable with this venture be, it's all based on an economic analysis. So just as when I eventually talk about standalone systems for photovoltaics and how we're going to do these applications, it's all about that scaling process, right? We don't look at what's in front of us. We look at what's at the end and move in a reverse manner when we're looking at standalone systems, which we'll talk about soon enough. Right. So food security. Now, this is something we can always find online. I found it a very good depiction in terms of food insecurity and how climate change is actually going to affect this. And we know the existing hot to dry spells, warmer temperatures of the sea surface, how is that actually going to affect food production? And in these nations where food is already scarce, it is going to get even more scarce. And these factors need to be looked at. So one of the points earlier by Dr. Rule, climate resilience. Resilience is a term that is used widely now. And it can have, there are a lot of different meanings. Resilience, climate resilience, economic resilience, the ability to bounce back to what I like to say equilibrium before the system has been perturbed or disrupted by some external factor. You know, the ability of a nation to bounce back from, say, a hurricane that passes by in the Caribbean, which is something we all know too well, you know, to that sense of normalcy before. So what I like to do here is just to spark your interest into having a look into this and how what we call adaptation in terms of what measures we're going to be putting into systems to have reductions in our CO2 emissions, and you know what we're going to put in place to make sure that, I'll just use the idea again, you know, post hurricane, you know, how well are we going to have small scale renewable energy systems to power, because the grid goes down, and how fast the grid comes back up is really crucial to a lot of these core essentials, you know, at the same time, from hospitals and eventually back down to the private citizens. So I said, here, let me do some analysis. Let me check on what's been going on in CARDI's statistics. Could I just, you know, dabble a bit and improve these ideas? So remember, this all comes back to rationalize again why agriculture and food and all these ideas that we're talking about. Now, all this can be found on the World Bank. So you can go have a check. I do endorse it just to spark your interest. And what I want to show here is these numbers in terms of percentage of what's actually been going on. I think CARDI had 1984 and 2016 as their updated figures on that strategic plan. You can get these 2018 statistics being updated here across the board. We see there's a definite drop overall when you see those figures of where we are. And this timeline now just gives an idea of what's going on in terms of agriculture, the birth of the fast food industry, and the ease at which we can get food that is not prepared, or to be more precise, the importation bill of many of the nations, of the CARICOM nations, is something, and the interest that is sparked by food production, you know, by many of these CARICOM nations, are not as high on the agenda as we would like. And you know, these definite dipped in these percentage of agriculture and forestry, fishing, all these other things come into play. So I just like to have those introductory points, get those ideas in. So we talked about climate, talked about food security. I just want to have one more statement again, a couple more slides on this is work on a pending paper that I have coming up. It's actually looking at ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEX and stuff. But I said, just to paint the idea of what's going on across the Caribbean, across our CARICOM member states. It's a geothermal potential, solar, photovoltaics, wind energy, hydropower, what's going on. And our focus today is that of solar power, right? So this really captures what's the potential, and these are from the CSIMS report, something that's very popular in terms of these renewable energy statistics. So allow me now to just, so I did went on last night to make some last minute changes to the presentation in terms of just a capture. When we talk about the Caribbean, wind and solar is dominant, very dominant, you know, based on our location and stuff. What sort of potentials are we looking at? Right, I just took, for example, some of these islands. Of course, you can go on solargis.com and download these maps of the islands, Grenada, Antigua, Barbuda, and St. Lucia. And you can see for yourself that the photovoltaic, which is the electricity generation aspect of solar power. Of course, we're going to be talking about direct use, etc. Very soon, but just to paint the idea, because what's actually there, what's a raw resource, and it's readily available. And you can see those figures, anything around 4.8 is very high in terms of solar irradiation values. That's excellent as compared to these more northern nations, that have much lower values and 2.5 and stuff. So in terms of resource, we are prime, we are positioned, and there's a lot of active work going on across the Caribbean in terms of solar power and wind. Jamaica in particular has that, one of the leaders across the Caribbean. So once again, so why persevere with crop drying? The presentation before us by Dr. Wickham extensively went through the sweet potato process and how you're going to get from the product at the start, you know, all the way at the end in terms of flour production. And there's a lot of points. I'm not going to read off everything because I want to have, you know, spark ideas. You will have this material to go back to, but it's all about that dehydration process, and you want to have that microbial contamination, a definite no-no. You know, you want to have it as safe as possible in its process making. So traditional methods, we just have a quick look here. The energy required for the drying process, you know, comes from fossil fuel-based products. If you have some sort of generator and you can feed it with diesel or gas or something like that, I'll have some pictures up to explain this further. And it's that aspect that we're going to be replacing with, because we just want to look at what are the mechanical aspects of the setup that are used and what sort of materials we can substitute to increase its efficiency. And then we want to look at the electrical components of these setup, right? And then say, okay, we're going to replace it all green with a renewable or a PV component that you're going to have there, right? And that's the alternative method that is being proposed here, right? So, like I said, just have some brief, quick applications to spark these ideas. Why is drying? You know, what sort of bother? Well, so what is drying? Is it a complicated process at the same time? Right. So these are the two questions we're looking at. So, you know, as we said, drying is basically a process of which removal of that H2 and prevent bacterial growth. Right. Dependent on the method used, you're going to have variations in these temperature values, humidity, a lot of different parameters there. Yes, unsteady flow of heat and mass transfer might sound a bit technical, but all we want to think about here is mass transfer in terms of humidity or air masses, and then, you know, mixing a little physics in terms of its chemical and physical alterations that can occur. And obviously the chemical alterations, if humidity is there present, you know, that feeds towards that microbial activity at the same time, affecting quality and color of the product, and all these things are issues that we want to know. Is this process going to yield something that we're accustomed to? So this is just a slide that you can find directly from CARDI's mandate, that 2018-2022 sort of roadmap, and you can see their goal, because I want to say one more time. The goal is to enhance performance of the sweet potato industry. They have an agenda, a mandate that's directly towards, you know, utilizing of this product and maximizing its potential and stuff, right, at the same time. And just to read this last line here, right? To elevate the sweet potato from the status that you're going to see there, right, to a more commercial or economic standpoint. And it's all again based on the volumes, right? Because obviously supply and demand that we're going to be looking at. You know, it's a little bit payback time periods. How important is that? Based on your volume, based on your target price, what are your revenues going to be looking at coming back? So we definitely don't have the time. I'm not going to go through step by step all of these because there are a lot of different variations of solar drying. I decided to just extract these two of them in particular and look at the pros and the cons and look at what sort of applications that we're going to be having here. But I made sure to put these references to spark your interest, to say, okay, I'm interested in what's this one in particular? Because based on your product, you have to then backtrack and say what sort of temperature ranges I'm looking at, then what sort of technology should I use based on these applications as you keep moving across the board. So I just want to look at two of them, the basic one and then an improvement on that, the open sun drying. And the basic, as you can get there, the materials to be dried at place and spread across mats, concrete floors, etc. Dried to the sun. What are the advantages, right? Cheapest method of drying, right, is the old school method of how things are done. It requirement of skilled labor is not necessary, independent of other energy sources, because it's just the sun alone that's directed on this. Right? But what are the disadvantages? There's the risk of exposure of the products to external factors, birds, insects, etc., degradation of the product, loss resulting from over drying at time because it's not a control system. Key word here, control system with this method, which many other applications of solar dryers have come on stream from what I've seen, spoiling of the product and resulting in growth of those microorganisms. So indirect type solar dryer or mixed mode, as we say. So with all these texts, eventually we're going to come to some pictures. I try to mix up the PowerPoint not to get it too woody at the advantages. So better product quality as it gets the required temperatures, better performance in terms of when compared to conventional type dryers, greater efficiencies. At the same time, there are a lot of papers out there with these analyses and outputs showing the performance of these systems as compared to others, retention of the product color and higher moisture pickup per kilogram of dry air, and some disadvantages. Just one of them that I always want to pick up again right here. Let's go straight to the last one, high initial investment. So capital investment or CapEx, and then we're going to be talking about operational expenses, OPEX and stuff. And what's the trade-off that we're looking here? Because if we have investors for a project that can help introduce incentives and subsidies, that CapEx is going to drop and incentivize personnel to invest more in a system, right? So we're going to be coming to that because I leave the economic standpoint further down to the end. So some basic ideas or designs that you're going to be seeing here, right? I can say I probably have about 5-10 minutes again or so. Just look at the technology. All I'm going to say here, because we're not going to be talking about long wave and short wave radiation and all those ideas. What we want to talk about in general is just think about the greenhouse effect, right? It's something we all will experience if you entered your vehicle after leaving it out in the sun, right, at the same point in time, or what we, basically we've been having. So greenhouse gas effect is a natural process, but based on, what we've been experiencing with higher levels of carbon dioxide emissions, is an enhanced state of which a natural process the planet generally occurs. So that's what this setup does, this type of solar dryer, that glass covering here. But what I want to spark your interest also in terms of, let me just go forward one and come back, right? If you look at this setup here, this is just open to the environment. Now this is definitely the solar dryer, the collector, as you're going to be having it there, but it doesn't have that fan applications, right? So just natural convection, so natural air flows, and it draws the convection with hot air up into this chamber that you have here with all those, if you want to have the sweet potatoes or other fruits, vegetables there at the same time. And then obviously it's going to have that exhaust fan at the tip further. Some persons might look to put extractors to create that draft flow more and more, right, at the same time. Or then you could introduce a fan blower and would this exit point to continuously push down and increase the rate at which you're going to have hot air masses across the product of interest at this point in time, right? And just to have some idea on the materials and stuff and the design of what we're going to be speaking about here. Now, this is the large scale application. This is not going to be exactly, because what I'm going to do now is take off some of these components, right? Because when I talk about PV technologies, once again, I'm biased in terms of all these components. We're going to keep it simple. What I want to show here is the energy flow and the sizing strategy for when we do like off-grid or standalone, which these cases are. They're off-grid and not connected to the electrical grid by no means, because we're using this, what we have here at this point. So what I want is that you see, when we look at the electrical component side, the fan base here, the extractors, everything, we need to do a full energy audit of all your load demands. Scale it backwards to know what's the rating of all your other electrical components. In this case, if it's a DC, direct current fan system, you would have need for that inverter, as you're seeing here. This battery is what we're going to be showing a case in which someone did a hybrid system with biomass coupled with PV at the same time, because having a storage component, which is a step even further, it gives you, based on your capacity of your storage, you could have up to 24 hours if you have that capacity there, but you could extend that capacity because, of course, at a late in the evening, nighttime, no sun is there, no drying occurs. But what if you had storage and you could extend that drying period, faster turnover of products, faster turnover of income at the same time, right? We don't have to focus too much on those charge controllers. I see a couple of questions popping up there. I will address them coming to the end. Just want to, once again, pique your interest. And days of autonomy, that's just for your battery sizing and stuff. So old school method here, we're seeing just laid out, but I want to move to some pictures now, right? This one has some fish application here at the same time, but I want you now to just have a couple seconds to look at it and think about it. Are you seeing a greenhouse effect being generated? Are you seeing its electrical components? And then let's come across here. All right, so let's use this case study here now. Solar greenhouse dryer improving farmers' lives while reducing food waste and wastage. Another key terms was mentioned earlier. So the solar dryer envelope, these, spherical shaped structures here that you're going to be seeing, is made of translucent multi-wall sheet polycarbonate materials. And what does that do? What does that do in terms of course, you're going to have your shortwave radiation or sunlight coming in. It passes through the structures. They get from short to long wave. They can exit the system now. Not all of them can exit the system now because their frequencies have been changed, and you can get that trapping of air and convection be generated inside. So temperatures inside can reach up to 60 degrees Celsius, which significantly reduce the drying time. And the shell or the polycarbonate material filters at UV light rays, so it maintains its natural color of the product. And if I just want to draw your attention to the electrical components, right? If you're looking at all these systems, these are fans that are going to create that flow of air mass, and you can substitute all your electrical components with PV systems, right? On the opposite side, if you use an extractor fan, also, like I said, you can have those integrated here. So we're coming very soon to the end now. I know tight on time. I always love to use the iceberg analogy, right? Just to show you the comparison between our conventional fossil fuel-based systems, right, and that of renewable energy-based systems. So when you hear a system and you say, oh, it has a high upfront cost, you get turned off. It's not an incentivized system here, but have you done a full economic evaluation to know if loans should be put out, for what we call future investments or future cash flows? Are they going to outweigh that upfront cost? And obviously, its break-even point, how soon, what's the payback time of these systems. So a full economic analysis has to be undertaken to determine its payback period, right, of a solar crop dryer as compared to traditional crop dryers. And once again, we're not going to just be highlighting all points, but just to come across your capex in terms of your investments, in terms of financing costs, so annuities. And I look at OPEX in terms of either variable nature or fixed nature, right, for salaries, or in this case, there's no fuel, there's no diesel or gas that you can be using for your blowers at the same time, so the fans as it is. So that OPEX per month or across per year that you have for the project's lifetime, that is totally taken away now, right? Because the what you saw there before, the iceberg analogy, you know, the capex for those fossil fuel phase systems based on the injection of subsidies might look small, but their OPEX might be large as compared to the inverse for an RE-based system, right? And just a quick skim through, this is not there, but I said, why don't I still put it in? What we want to look at here, just look at the little blocks that we have here. The NPV, one of the most important economic key points, right, or key indicators is your net present value. If this project is going to break even in terms of its profits, how and exactly how much. So what you're going to have to do is look at evaluating the taking all those future values of O&M, operation maintenance costs, all those, you know, cash flows that you have to pay and then bring it back to a present scale scenario, right? And then obviously, if it is greater, just on eyeball account here, you can see this green block here. Definitely, just have an idea what's going on here. It is more than this blue one or C-note, which is the initial investment of the product. So we say, okay, yes, we're going to have something that's greater than zero, and obviously the more greater than zero, the more attractive the project, the more profitable this project is going to be. And these same ideas are applicable when we're looking at payback period, right? At some point, you're going to have that break-even point in terms of period, and every point after that, those cash flows are going to be definite profit lines, margins, right? So one case study, I'm sure it's only about 2 more slides, and then we jump straight into those questions. The Arizona State University, this is something that's recently been put out there. Just look at these sort of applications. This is a very nice small scale application that we're going to be having here. The Pakistan Centers for Advanced Studies in Energy equips these Pakistani communities with the latest technology in food drying using RE, and you can see for yourself. This is the one I said that uses solar biomass hybrid tunnel dryers, applied energy research, offers significant time savings and quality improvements in the drying. SWAT is the fruit of interest that you're going to be having, and you can see here all the electrical components that are substituted in terms of PV. You can see the fans on the inside here that are going to be having that heat flux being generated for the air mass flow across. All right, closing remarks. So we're nearly there, right? An increase in the RE penetration across the Caribbean members can yield fruitful benefits, and we always want to hit those 3-point approach. It's energy diversification, it's an economic standpoint, and it's an environmental standpoint, all the positive contributions that can occur there. The integration of solar crop dry is a proven technology and highly applicable in the Caribbean, as the Caribbean has an abundance of solar power, abundance, I would say, right? A full energy audit. So this is my point I'm trying to say here. When I get a chance now to see those questions that pop up, I believe a full energy audit, right? It needs to be done to look at the load demand of the system, the volume of the products of interest that you want to have, because remember, the volumes will then dictate what sort of prices that you want to get, what sort of profit lines that you want to expect per year, right, based on the volume. And then based on the volumes of that you have, that would then dictate the mechanical system, the system sizing of the solar dryer chambers. And once those chambers go up in size, what else goes up in size? The power outputs of these extractor fans itself. And then obviously then that leads finally back now to the PV system sizing components. You can say, okay, now I know my power output requirements. I can then come back and say, I then scale my system at this sizing. And then maybe introduce some sort of storage component. So you can have longer drying periods to faster turnovers at those points. All right, so when the presentation is shared, please, if you're interested to speak, have a full look at these references, and I would say DM for now and stop my presentation. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Randy, for your lucid and inspiring presentation. We have a few minutes for questions. Let's go to the chat.
Okay, I'll try to go through each of these quickly. Yeah, the introduction of solar dryers allow for drying of crops, fish, measure of agricultural resistance.
Well, Dr. Randy, that one need to be
That one is
answered
outside.
by Mr. Elvis Morin.
Yeah, feel free, Ms. Morin, at this point in time, if you wish to interject.
Mr. Morin? Mr. Morin, are you with us? You can speak on behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture and Climate Resilience with regards to sourcing funding for farmers and fishermen who are interested in solar technology.
Okay, I didn't hear the question, but again, thank you very much, and thanks for the presentations thus far. Well, in terms of I cannot give anything conclusive related to that, but it's something I think the ministry will be looking at as to how we go forward. You know, because we do understand the value of that kind of technologies now as we look forward. So it's something I believe that and as I listen to the two presentations, I think it's something that we would have to get to that direction. So I wouldn't want to be conclusive now, but I think it's something that we would be willing to discuss and come up with something going forward.
Right. The other aspect is about pilot projects to be organized, maybe not by the ministry, but would my FAO counterparts care to speak about that? Dr. Renata or Rosa or Vomaran?
Sorry, I didn't hear your question very clearly. Can you repeat specifically what you were asking in that context?
Someone is asking about pilot projects being organized for farmers and fisher folk who are interested in solar technology. Well, apart from this particular project focuses on sweet potato flour and so on. But this person is interested in projects for fisher folks, for example, fish and sea moss drying especially. So he wants to know if pilot projects will be organized concerning that.
Okay, I think I refer to Dr. Clark or Vermeran from the region. Over to Dr. Clark or Vermeran, please.
Hi, good day. Dr. Clark has had another engagement. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. In short, the current program for FAO for Grenada does include the opportunity for pilots. What I could say though is that the current work they're going to do with potato will be the beginning. We do have 2 projects as part of our program that focus on the climate change adaptations at the community level, where we would have the opportunity to extend the evaluations. And Grenada is also, as Dr. Clark referred to in her opening remarks, we are looking to also do pilot and evaluation of solar powered cooling systems in Grenada all tied to the response to COVID-19. So the short answer is there is an opportunity being done within this year into 2021.
Thank you very much for Moran. Back to you, Dr. Randy.
Okay, I'm just going to go through the list here. So now I'm seeing from Ken Lee, in terms of the quality degradation and retention. Let me answer the latter part first and then bounce back to Dr. Wickham on the earlier part. Does it depend on the material of the crop and size being dried? Yes, once again, you have to find the type of solar dry technology that is the most favorable, not only to the crop of interest, but the volume and the size that is of interest that you want to have to either market on a small scale, medium, or large scale at the same time, right? But we are pushing for that mixed mode version there. In terms of the quality derivation, your nutritional retention, I'm not a food production chemist, so I can't ideally comment on that. Would Dr. Wickham wish to comment on that aspect?
Dr. Wickham, are you with us?
Okay, if not, apologies there, and we could probably get back to you in terms of that answer. We can move on to Judith. Didn't fully catch it here, but I will try to address it. So we produce.
Yes, hi.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, we're looking at in terms of quality, degradation, and nutritional retention, right? Just have a comment on that because we're looking at the types of drying technology. Is this process of drying, does it retain these nutrients and stuff that we normally have?
Yes.
Yes, the biggest problem with deterioration, especially microbial deterioration, is the production of toxins. The production of toxins that could be deleterious to health. With respect to the natural ingredients in the commodity itself, in the flour, the largest component is just carbohydrate, a starch. And microbial invasion will break that down, but by the time it's broken down to the point where it's a problem, you would have so many other aroma and other associated quality deterioration that won't even be edible. So the nutrient retention for the root crops is not a huge problem. In fact, it is not a problem in the short term for drying because you're simply drying something like protein and something like starch, which is fine. The nutrients, that's a major component. The mineral component in some of the root crops would also be not affected. And the other major food component, nutrient component, is fiber. That too will not be affected. So drying is an excellent way of preserving the nutritional quality while you preserve the root crop itself. The biggest problem is with aflatoxins being produced as a result of the activity of microorganisms in the product that has been made or in the product while it is drying or on even the dried flour that has been processed from the milled dried particles. So in looking at storage, you have to look at all areas. First, the quality of the raw material as you store it. Also the quality of, because I recommend that you store the chips, what I call it chips, which is the reduced size material as whether grated components or shredded material. I don't recommend that you store the flour unless you're ready to make it. So you store the chips, it reduces the likelihood of contamination. You store it dried, and then you reheat or dry to increase crispness, and then mill immediately. I don't know if I answered what the problem was, but generally no problem with deterioration of nutrients unless the microbial activity is so great that it interferes with even the texture. It gets slimy. You're literally breaking down the starch and carbohydrate and protein in the material. Other than that, it's fine.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dr. Wickham. I'd just like to touch back on Judith's question here. Just to make it clear, I'm not sure if I said it wrongly, but I believe what I said is that battery storage is not a must. It is a recommendation if the economic aspect is there, right? Because if funding is there for battery storage, so that means if your capex now, right, your upfront cost that you're going to have will be larger, but if you do have the finances for battery storage, it will be beneficial to you as longer duration of drying can occur and faster turnaround of products for sales, and then you can get faster turnovers of revenues or those cash flows as you're going to have. Great to hear that you want to go full solar for the crop dryer and generation of electricity, right? It's not a total no-brainer because at the same time, like I said, you just have to look at low demands. Remember, the situation I gave is an off-grid system, right? So it's as we say, a standalone system, something that's independent of the electrical grid itself. So not totally sure if you might be tied in with the grid, and then that design will be differently. A lot of other electrical components will have to be introduced. Once you interact with the grid, you're going to have that AC component, and your inverter is a must at that point. But battery is a thumbs up if the economics is there. We've seen sales for batteries are dropping right now. That's why becoming more and more attractive. And based on the size of the project also, like I said, size of the project will then dictate size of the battery, as we have there. Moving on, I see Andel put up a registration link, and down to Mark, we have you use solar hot water as the heat sink for the fan based solar dryer. Do you have references for sizing? For the fan, I'm not sure exactly. I think it's a little mix up there at the same time, because the purpose of the fan is to introduce that. Okay, I'm now catching what you're trying to say. You can use it as a heat sink at the same time, then create a draft that will act as a fan. Now, the problem I would have there is introducing another aspect that, like I said again, if economics is there and you want to be inventive of this, it is not something of the norm to introduce solar water heater at the fan-based end, because the expenses and the efficiencies of that system, it may not produce that sort of trade-off that you can be having for these types of extractor fans or fan system based to push those drafts that you needed. So it's more of an inventive aspect that I believe there, but I do recommend we stick with those blowers at the end to introduce those drafts. I believe Mark talked about the pilot project. Judith, thank you. Okay, any more questions, or would that be it on my end?
Dr. Randy, I think Willan Mark is referring to Vormeran's comment. Vormeran, you want to comment here? Willan Mark is asking, when will the pilot programs begin? Willan is especially interested in CMOS drying.
Yes. What I can say to you, to be honest, there's a joint UN project. Grenada is finalizing. You heard me?
Hold on. Sorry. I misread. Willan is in root crops drying. Sorry. I thought it was the CMOS drying. Sorry about that, Willan. But nevertheless, go ahead and comment about the CMOS one.
So what we do have is priorities from Grenada that has given us the indication for both CMOS and drying for other fruits and vegetables as priorities in addition to roots and tubers. So what the joint UN project and the other project that is coming on stream, they're both, one is already operational actually, and we are developing the work plan with the steering committee in Grenada at present. Those work plans should be finalized by the end of this month, and expectation that activities to begin would commence later this year with community assessments and moving into application into 2021, possibly I can average probably March. We can begin. Subsequent to that, the other work will roll out later this year as the process moves forward. What would happen, and you can look out for though, is the community consultations and discussions where we try to identify and prioritize the communities for this activity and the follow-up activities under the other project, the joint UN project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maran. Well, on this particular project that we are launching today, the selection of the pilot group will be done shortly, and this one is for sweet potato flour, sweet potato drying and sweet potato flour. So hopefully in September we'll have the erection of the solar dryers located at a particular focus group. Let me say here that if you have not registered, please do so, because we're going to use your email to send out all information and the record of this meeting to the registered participants only. So if you are not registered, please look at the registration link in the chat there and please register. Thank you very much. All right, so the rest of the Caribbean will be kept updated. Yes, as part of the result of the demonstration, in fact, we will spread the information throughout the Caribbean, and we have a number of participants on this webinar who are across the Caribbean, so they will be fed with information from this project. So that looks at it so far for questions.
Sorry, Chair,
comments?
just to go on the heels of what you just said though, the joint UN project is in 5 countries, Barbados and the OECS, which would allow for the information to come through the Ministries of Agriculture from FAO's point of view, to be shared with the participants, as well as to those who are participating and those other the beneficiaries of the other projects. And I trust that it would happen. What we'd also do is, as like CARDI, to circulate it through the network, the information and follow up through our media and social media publications and announcements on the progress that is taking place with this activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Maran. Any other comments or any other questions? Right, it seems as though we have expired now, so therefore we are at the end of this webinar. Could Dr. Roll, could you please make your closing comments, please?
Okay, yes, thank you very much, Mr. Handel. This afternoon, I have to say, has been really great. We have learned quite a lot about different dimensions of the whole issue of value addition to our root crops through the use of solar drying. And we did it from different perspectives. We talked about, what it means in terms of, the developmental context, what it means in terms of economics, what it means for our food security and nutrition. And then the last 2 speakers actually brought these issues to life in terms of, well, how Dr. Wickham has shown us, yes, it is possible. Yes, we have done it. And we can move into not only producing, just for simple processing options, but there is the potential again. We have so many small individuals who are looking for economic opportunities in terms of employment, some of these opportunities can be tapped in terms of, using what we produce locally, and substituting that wheat flour by 40%. That is significant. So, these are the kinds of things that we have to begin to think about a lot more in terms of the context of what it is that we produce. And more so, we've been seeing that sort of thinking taking place in a lot of countries with COVID-19, where people begin to start to think about a little bit more critically about what this whole issue of the changes that are taking place in terms of trade, in terms of opportunities mean for different people. We have seen so many people who actually, because of the problems, have been displaced. And these are some of the potentials that one could be looking at as we go ahead with the projects of this type. We also learned quite a lot from Dr. Kun about the options and actually the all of what goes into the design of the drying, the design and the development and use and application of the solar dryers. And clearly we have an opportunity right there in front of us in terms of what is available in terms of the energy that we have in the Caribbean, the solar energy that is very poorly tapped. And this is where we are doing it already. There's action already ongoing in the region, but how can we scale that up and maximize the use of that potential? So I think it's now our role to begin to put all what we have discussed today into perspective as we move ahead in terms of the implementation of the projects. And I'm really looking forward to working in collaboration with CARDI and all of our different stakeholders toward the implementation of this project in Grenada this year and in the other two countries. I think it's Dominica and Antigua next year, as we to be able to really come up with some good data, some evidence, the types of information that one can use as a basis to go into helping to work toward the expansion of some of the simple pilots that we are able to generate on the ground in the region. I thank you very much for all of the work that has been done, Mr. Andal, by you in particular, to bring this whole workshop together. Also, thank you very much to Vermeran and the team at SLC. I know you were also working hard with to support Mr. Andal. So over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosa. At this point in time, we almost to close. Let me say thanks to all the key people who have played a great part in the conduct of this webinar. We have the presenters of remarks at the beginning, Mr. Barton Clark, Executive Director of CARDI, Mr. Moraine from the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agricultural Lands in Grenada, Dr. Renata Clark, the FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean, and also the one who just spoke, Dr. Rosa Roll, the Senior Enterprise Development Officer of the FAO headquarters in Rome. We thank you, all of you, so very much for taking the time out to be with us today, the preparation that you have done and to make your remarks. We also want to thank our lucid presenters. We have Dr. Linda Wickham and Dr. Randy Kun. We are so grateful that you were able to be with us today to make your presentations. We and you, the participants, this webinar could not be conducted without you. I also want to say thank you also to other people behind the scenes who were doing the hard work to make this webinar possible. We have other people at the FAO office in Barbados, especially Gomaran. We also have other people at our CARDI office in Trinidad. We have Dennis Bisai, Kurt Roberts, Letitia. So we thank you all so very much for the parts that you have played in making this webinar a success. We're looking forward for when we have other webinars again, and let me remind those of you, if any of you have not registered, please register so that we can send out information to you. Thank you so very much for being with us today. Thank you so very much for staying with us, and we wish you a good day. Thank you.
Okay.